Well, welcome back to the Section 304 podcast, Drinkin Beers, Talkin Eers. Joined on the phone by Mr. Brent Solheim, member of the 98 Sweet 16 team. And it just seems like yesterday, Brent, you were in Morgantown, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it goes by quick. You know, when I was a freshman, we had a fifth-year senior named Lawrence Pollard that was like, you guys will blink an eye and you'll be telling me, a freshman, how fast it goes by. You know, and sure enough, we were seniors telling them, hey, these 4 years go by quick, but the last 18 years have gone by incredibly quick. You're right.
Obviously, well, let's back up just a little bit and talk. What led you to Morgantown? I always like to get the story of how you got to Morgantown because you're from Minnesota. So, yep. What led you to Morgantown?
So there's in my hometown is the Mayo Clinic, and there's people from all over the country and all over the world that come in there to practice medicine. It's an international city. Well, one of the doctors there was a WVU grad, and he was at a fundraiser, and he talked to one of the coaches afterward, and the coach was like, "Hey, is there anyone from Minnesota worth recruiting?" And he said, "Well, there's two guys, myself and then one of my teammates, Sam Jacobson, who went on to play for the University of Minnesota and the Lakers and played in the NBA for 3 years." So that summer when coaches were scouting, the AAU games, my AAU team played in Kentucky, LA, Vegas, and Phoenix. And I had a pretty decent summer, and they just started recruiting me after that.
Who was your lead recruiter? Do you remember?
It started off as Coach Gary McPherson.
Oh.
But the fall of my senior year, he took a job with the Mountaineer Athletic Club, and Mel Hankinson took his place on the coaching staff.
Okay.
So Coach Hank recruited me after that.
Now, Brent, this is John. Weren't you also a highly recruited football player?
I don't know about highly recruited. I was a decent football player. I was a quarterback and punter.
Uh-huh.
I was first team AP All-State, and actually the team that recruited me the most of any college football team was the University of Michigan. So I went there on an unofficial visit, met the coaching staff, toured the facilities and everything like that. But the week before our state championship game for the largest schools in Minnesota in football, they called and said they were only going to recruit or only going to offer a scholarship for one player, one quarterback that year, and it wasn't going to be me. So when they told me that, I knew I was going to play basketball at that point.
Now, did you punt, go out to punt for West Virginia, or did I dream that?
Yeah. So after we played in the Sweet 16, I'd played basketball my whole life and football my whole life up until college. And I was first team All-State punter, 44.1 yards per punt my senior year of high school. And I said, you know what, I'm going to just go out for the football team since I didn't have basketball practice, I didn't have postseason conditioning. And, I actually got to punt twice in the spring game, and I averaged, I think, 40.5 yards on both kicks. So it was a fun experience.
That shot Jared West hit against Cincinnati. I mean, that's the way it was.
Yes.
That's the way it was drawn up, right?
It absolutely was, yes. Now it wasn't drawn up to have your player tip the ball, but that he was supposed to come off the pick and look for the shot, and he did. He hit it. It was incredible.
We obviously in the last 10 years or so, West Virginia's had a lot of success. So I think that 98 team, just standing back as a fan, tends to get overlooked. But when you go back and look at the talent on that team, can you just talk, because you guys had, there was 5 or 6 seniors that year.
Yeah, we had 6 seniors. We had a couple guys leave the year before. If we could have had Gordon Malone, who was a second-round NBA draft pick. If he would have stayed, we would have had him as well. But, yeah, we had 6 seniors. 3 of us spent all 4 years at WVU. Damien Owens, Jared West, and myself. And then Greg Jones, Brian Lewin, and Adrian Pledger joined us from JUCO. And they fit right in, and we hit it off immediately. We are a very, very tight-knit group.
But I guess what I was saying was, you tend to look at that team, and do you think that team gets overlooked a little bit, considering, especially with maybe some of the Johnny-come-latelys that haven't been watching WVU basketball in the last 25, 30 years?
I think so a little bit. I didn't really follow WVU basketball before I got here, but it was my understanding that WVU had not been to the Sweet 16 in something like 25 or 30 years before that. So we were the first one. A lot of hype around that, but if they don't make it to the Sweet 16 now, the season kind of feels like a disappointment. And that wasn't at all the case back then. It was a huge deal when we beat Cincinnati and made it to the Sweet 16. But most people look back at the glory days here recently of like the Final Four team, and that was a really, really fun team to watch. But I think you're right. I think we were the first team, that kind of set the trend or set the bar higher for the university to, get to that next level.
Brent, what was it like jumping from the A-10 to the Big East?
Oh, it was night and day. We would go and play in some pro arenas like the Washington Bullets at the time, now the Wizards, when we would go and play Georgetown. But the A-10, we would go to some of those small spots like Rhode Island and St. Bonaventure, and it was almost like a big high school gym. But it was totally, totally different playing in the Big East.
The obviously when you look back at that run, we talked a little bit about beating Cincinnati, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the Utah game. That was because did they end up in the final that year?
They did. After they beat us, I think it was 65-62. You can only beat us by 3 points. The next game they matched up against the defending champions, Arizona, and they beat them, I want to say, by 20 points. And then they went on to beat North Carolina, who had Vince Carter and Antoine Jamison, National Player of the Year. And they lost to the University of Kentucky in the finals. But Other than that loss, we were their closest game for that run.
Because it seemed like to me, I remember, and now I'm trying to think back to it, just trying to think back to watching it. But I just remember you guys playing them pretty tough, and then
Keith Van Horn.
They had Doliak and Andre Miller.
Was it not Keith?
No, Van Horn was gone.
Van Horn was gone the year before. You're right.
Oh, okay.
But I just remember you guys playing them really close, and then when they ended up making the run, I kept thinking, man, I think I always thought that the team that year was much more competitive than what we remember, especially in that Utah game. It was so close, but
yeah, we had our chances. They hit some free throws down at the end. We had a couple of calls that could have went either way, and we certainly could have beaten that game. If they don't get a call or two at the end, we win. So yeah, it was a very, very competitive game.
Brent, can you kind of talk about, I guess, the evolution of basketball? I honestly think it's kind of soft now, but I always remember you as a physical, like blue collar guy down on the block. If someone, if you were sending someone to the free throw line, they were going to pay for it.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that? I mean, it just seems the game now is so guard heavy, and there's just not as much contact as there used to be.
I agree. I think they call it a little bit differently now than they used to. I think they're maybe getting a little bit out of control. It's certainly more physical back then. And it's funny, I mentioned Gordon's name a little bit ago, Gordon Malone, former teammate and roommate. And I talked to him last night for the first time in years. And we were talking about how tough the Big East was physically. And the word he used to describe the Big 12 right now was corny. There's not much. I didn't use that word he did, but I had to laugh when he said that. But it's definitely not as physical now. I mean, if someone went to the basket, you made them pay. If you couldn't, make a good play, you were gonna put them online, and they paid for it. So I think is it better or worse right now? I don't really know, but it's certainly different. That's for sure.
Obviously very physical in the Big East. Who were some of the guys that you remember going against that it was always like, damn, this was a rough night, or it was a very physical night, even though you may have won or lost, but who do you remember being pretty tough going up against in the Big East?
Now, early on, Georgetown was tough. Their starting line, their front line, all went to the NBA. You had Othello Harrington, Jerome Williams, and especially their big guy. What's his name?
Jahidi White.
Jahidi White. Yeah, that guy. He's one of the few guys that you could not move around the block at all. If he set up, you were not moving him. You had to beat him to the spot and try to just stay in front of him. But my goodness, some of those guys were just. I'm 6'8". I played at 235. I was pretty strong, but a guy like that sets up on the block. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just so physically tough. Those guys were, and then we had some other guys on some of the other teams. Like UConn had some pretty tough guys. I remember Kurt King punched me in the face one game. That got a little bit physical that game, but yeah, they was definitely physical. Not like it is now at all.
I always have to ask you guys, give me one really good Coach Catlett story, because obviously Cat was a quite the character.
Yeah.
Do you have any good Catlett stories you can share with us?
I could probably go back to that game at UConn. I think it was my junior year. So we're playing up there. It's a physical game, it was competitive. I actually broke my nose in the first half going for a loose ball. I had to have it a deviated septum, had it reset a year and a half later. But the first half, that's when it happened. Then Kurt King punches me in the face in the second half, right in the nose, which is already broken.
Oh, man.
And, man, I'm just furious that game, furious. So we get on the bus, and Coach Catlett was sitting in the way back. Usually he sat in the front by the driver, but he sat in the way back where Davey and I was sat. And I was sat right in front of Davey. So I go to my seat, I just sit down, and Coach Catlett says, Solheim, I think we're going to have to make you a two-guard. You're not tough enough to play inside. Oh, man, my blood boiled. But that was pretty funny. He had a way of getting under your skin when he wanted to.
Did he ever, and I asked Chris Moss this yesterday or last week, he ever let you try on the leather blazer?
No. No, we all heard about that. He definitely wore it a lot. Certainly not my fashion style, but he had no problem rocking it.
I've always said, the Coliseum now has a lot of memorabilia, especially in the basketball facility. But I've always thought in one of the gates they should get that jacket from the Cat and put it on a mannequin and just put it in a gold case and let it sit in the Coliseum, because it's obviously you bring up Cat's leather jacket and everybody knows what it is, and I think it needs to be hung or hanging out there in the Coliseum. That's for sure.
They should put that next to Hug's big gold. He said he wore that one game. You used to see pictures of online all the time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that was classic. And he swore up and down he'd never wear that thing again. I've actually heard a story from one of that he actually threw that thing in a dumpster somewhere afterwards.
Did he?
That's what I've been told.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it was nice suit, real nice suit.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Well, can we talk just a little bit more about the Cincinnati? You ever get to talk to Hugs about that Cincinnati game? I'm sure you come back to the reunions. Do you ever get to rib him a little bit and talk to him about it?
Not really. There was one incident where it was brought up, and I could not stop laughing about it. So Huggins, WVU guy, he has done a fantastic job of bringing back the former players, getting everyone to know each other. I've met guys that I've never met before, and I've become friends with a lot of guys that I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for Huggins, putting these types of things together where we have the opportunity to meet some of the older and younger guys. So the first time he set something up, it was like Midnight Madness, but it wasn't at midnight, so I think they called it Mountaineer Madness, where people could come in at 8 o'clock, watch the first practice. He asked all the old players in the area to come back, so Jared West and myself came together to it, and this was the first time either one of us had met Hugs, and, we shook his hand, and Jared asked, "How you doing, Coach?" And Huggy said, "A lot better than the last time I saw you."
Nice.
Which was pretty funny. He's good for some one-liners, but that was the only joke that we did. I'm certainly not one to rub in a game or anything like that, and I have the utmost respect for Huggins and what he's done, not only for the basketball program but the state. So I'm not going to bust his chops too much.
Obviously this week we beat Kansas, and And historically, it seems like when we've beat Kansas, the kids seem to run on the court. But I don't think there's ever been a bigger celebration than the night you guys beat UConn. Can you?
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit about that game and because it got a little wild in there afterwards?
Yeah, so they were the number 6 team in the country at the time. ESPN was doing the broadcast. Dick Vitale, that was the only game in the 4 years that I was there that Dick Vitale did or called. So there was a lot of hype around it. We were all actually watching film in our locker room when they let the students in, and you could hear them running upstairs. And there's a lot of concrete between us and where the console is, where the students come in. And, you know, it just kind of got quiet in the locker room, and we all just looked around like, what is going on up there? So it's just a lot of students all rushing in at the same time, trying to get the best seats. And it was a really, really exciting night. Greg Jones came off, was on fire right at the beginning of the game and set the tone. And, we ended up beating them by 17. They went on to win the national title the next year. So I was actually in Cancun watching them play in the national title the following year. And, talking to the people there, like, hey, we whipped them by 17 last year. They're lucky we aren't still playing, But it was one of the highlights of my career. You know, I didn't score a lot that game, but it was still, that atmosphere was so fun to play in. My parents got to meet Dick Vitale. And actually, ESPN did a story. My parents came down and lived with Jared West and myself for about half the season.
Oh, that's
Sports
right.
Illustrated did a story. ESPN did a story. And that was the game where they were filming my mom and dad, filming me during the game. They filmed us after. And just a lot of good memories around that game in particular.
Yeah, because I knew you were coming on this weekend, so I went back and was kind of just looking at some stuff, and then it hit me. I was like, yeah, that was 98, because you think back to that season and you automatically think Cincinnati in the tournament, but that was a huge win, and like you said, not only did you guys beat them, you guys whipped them pretty good that night.
Yeah, it was not close, and man, it was a lot of fun. The fans. Tell you what, the West Virginia fans are some of the best in the country, and Dick Vitale for years. After that, he would talk about the crowd in Morgantown. They're crazy in Morgantown. He had talked about that for years afterwards.
Yeah, he was even because he called the game the other night too. So he was he made reference not to that game but to the fans a few times. So I'm sure he remembers.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, Brent, thanks for coming on the show. I know I've been in touch with you over the last year, and we message back and forth a little bit on Facebook, and but I wanted to say thanks for coming on the show. It's always good hearing from you, getting those stories, and I know the people that listen to the show enjoy hearing from the former guys and catching up with them. So I want to say thanks for coming on.
Hey, no problem, Anthony. I know you're a big music guy, and I know I still got to get you those newspapers from when Prince passed away. So I'll try my best to get them in the mail this week.
Well, actually, I may be coming up to Morgantown, so maybe we can try to meet up or something. I'll let you know. I'll catch up. I'll catch up.
Okay, sounds good, Anthony. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Brent.